Last week I reported to you, the story of a politicized nativity scene. This is nothing new. The Vatican has, for years under Francis, issued a nativity scene, and it seemed like every year we would be waiting with bated breath to see how they're going to use the nativity scene to scandalize the faithful, sometimes making environmental messages out of the nativity scene, and other years giving us a Catholic nativity scene, whether it's culturally depicting the nativity scene in a more classical Italian and European kind of way, or a nativity scene with Asian flair or something, but otherwise still recognizably Christian. Well, with that kind of a lead, how can you be surprised when various dioceses around the world feel empowered to politicize their nativity scene and scandalize the faithful? And so I reported to you last week about this one. This was up in St. Susanna's Parish in Dedham, Massachusetts, where the creche was replaced by a sign that says ICE was here. Yeah, basically saying that law enforcement took our blessed Lord. Utterly blasphemous. Terrible message. The priest who did so is, of course, someone whose faith seems to be politics before anything else. Well, I reported to you that last week. Since then, the Archdiocese of Boston has, to their credit, told them to take the thing down, and the priest is refusing. Now, if he was an ultra-conservative priest or a traditionalist priest, whether conservative and offered the new Mass, but offered it as if he believed what the Catholic faith teaches about the Eucharist and the Catholic faith, if he acted that way at the altar, or if he was a traditionalist offering the TLM with all the due reverence you would expect from a priest like that. If he was something like that, we already know what would happen to him. But he's not. This is a progressive priest. So we first go here to everybody's favorite news website, IJR. Pardon all their gigantic ads here. This is almost ridiculous, but this is a good report. The headline, Church Nativity Display Sparks Clash with ICE and Archdiocese. This is a clash, they're saying. We are now having, of course, government officials responding to this, because you might be aware that there's kind of an environment out there right now where law enforcement in this particular field are being subject to threats, other unspeakable acts of violence, and are, in general, fearful for their lives for enforcing the law, to the point where there are some state governments now and their officials, including my old home state of Oregon. The governor there, a real piece of work, by the way, has said that they will essentially arrest any of the federal law enforcement agents. To give you an idea of where that's going, use your imagination if that were to happen. And this, federal officials rightly say, is these kinds of nativity displays with a politicization of the faith in this way adds to tensions around basic law enforcement that under the Obama administration were handled in much more robust ways than now, with much higher numbers of people being removed. Those are a fact of history. And they didn't get pushed back like this. They didn't get pushed back at all, in fact. Here are the details. A Christmas display outside a Massachusetts church has ignited a fierce backlash from immigration authorities in the Archdiocese of Boston, setting off a debate over politics, faith, and the boundaries of religious expression. According to Fox News, instead of the traditional infant Jesus in the manger at St. Susanna Parish in Dedham this year, visitors are met with an empty cradle and a stark sign reading, ICE was here. The display also includes contact information for a local group that tracks enforcement. The message immediately drew condemnation from ICE Acting Director Todd Lyons, who called the installation inflammatory. The actions of the activist Reverend Stephen Gisoma are absolutely abhorrent and add to a dangerous narrative responsible for more than 1,150% increase in physical attacks on these police officers. Reverend or Father Stephen Gisoma, the parish pastor, said the display is part of an annual effort by the church's Peace and Justice group. Each year, they reinterpret the nativity to reflect modern circumstances. I want you to hear that again. They said the display is part of an annual effort by the church's Peace and Justice group. Each year, they interpret the nativity to reflect modern circumstances. Now, I'm not one who expects the Pope to intervene in every little thing going on in the church, no matter how big of a headline it makes in some country. But hypothetically speaking, if the Pope or if the bishop there wants to do something to quell the tensions, and as an act of unity and as an act of good faith towards those of us in the church who feel like we've been kind of pushed to the side, those of us who tend to have a more conservative or rightward bent, it would be to put that priest at the very least on leave. At the very least. And to order him to take it down. And if he doesn't, he can lose his ministry, at least as that parish priest. Go work in a prison ministry somewhere if he is so worried about the justice ministry and his distortion of Catholic Church's teaching on social justice. If that is his concern, he has to obey his bishop on these kinds of matters. But as you'll see, that's not going to happen. We will go here now to a website called masslive.com for another update on this. This is amazing. Headline: Boston area church defies Archdiocese request to remove anti-ICE nativity. To the bishop's credit. And again, any communication, any directive to the priest from the diocese is done at the request of the bishop, even if it's through one of his agents, like a lay employee, like you'll hear from here. That lay employee is only doing what the bishop is telling him to do. And so, to the bishop's credit, he's telling him to take this down. Now, I would much rather the bishop very publicly say this, to go onto the archdiocesan social media accounts and tell him to take this down, to add the element of public pressure. But I'm not the bishop. He's handling it the way he thinks he should handle this. But I do think this is at least a good start. But that priest should probably be removed from active ministry, at least at this parish. This parish is a political organization. They're social justice ministry. They do this every year. An article quote: The Reverend Stephen Jasoma, the pastor, told WBUR the display's purpose was to focus the Christmas story on the plight of immigrants. It comes after he recently spoke with refugee families the church has worked with. These are folks who carry a lot of scars with them. Some of them are physical scars, but most are emotional, he told the outlet. They've seen their folks ended in front of them. The Archdiocese of Boston pushed back against the display. Terry Donnellan, a spokesperson for the Archdiocese, said in a statement to Mass Live that the display should be removed, calling it a divisive political messaging. The Archdiocese also noted that St. Susanna neither requested nor received permission for the display. The church's, quote, norms prohibit the use of sacred objects for any purpose other than the devotion of God's people, Donnellan told Mass Live. This includes images of the Christ child in the manger, which should be used solely to foster faith and devotion. The Archdiocese spokesperson also noted to Mass Live that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has long-standing statements on immigration, calling for the humane treatment of migrants, especially those in detention. We bishops advocate for a peaceful reform of our nation's immigration laws and procedures, the USCCB said. Human dignity and national security are not in conflict. The priest did not respond to a request for comment from the news outlet. So the bishop has called for it to be taken down, and the priest is not going to go along with it, at least so far. I'll keep you informed as the story develops, as they say. But I'm curious, do you think that's enough from the bishop? Do you think that maybe they need to bring in a very conservative priest there who will fundamentally reorganize that parish? I'm not a believer in bringing in a priest who's a good fit for the community, meaning if you've got a community full of people who conflate their faith with their politics, that they should bring in a priest who's like that. In fact, quite the opposite. And I would say the same thing if it was like we'll call it like the Napa Institute, in California, I think they're located. There's like sort of a libertarian kind of neoconservative think tank that has a lot of Catholic priests who are kind of affiliated with that way of thinking brought there as well. I'm not wild about that stuff either. And if you had a parish like that and they started having, a nativity scene with some 2A kind of stuff going on, that would be wrong too. I laugh because it's so ridiculous to think about. That'd be wrong too. And I would hope that diocese would call them out for it. You don't use the faith that way. You don't. It's time for them to stop. And maybe a priest should be brought in to reorient the parish, to just help the people be focused on the gospel and actually saving souls, instead of whatever the du jour issue of the day is. Now, in the past, that diocese has put up with. That parish using the nativity scene to focus on the environment, on 2A issues, on whatever else du jour issue from the political left was that day. And it's always their issues. Maybe the diocese should finally have a good, long conversation with that priest. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. Share this on social media if you can. That helps a lot too. And if you've ever thought about supporting the work we do here at Return to Tradition, options in the description box below. Subscribe to our Patreon, that kind of thing. All help keep these daily messages coming. Your support is greatly appreciated. And always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.